fast this computer's, this one's too strong.
It's 2 pages. I'm down to 1 contact.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did you have the other eye done?
No, I didn't have anything done because I do monovision, corrected my distance in the one eye.
Oh.
So now I'm down to 1, and maybe when I go back next month, I'll be down to none. No, I don't think that'll happen. I still struggle. You're all set?
All right. You gonna give us a countdown?
Where's the flag?
Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. This is the Thursday, September 13th, 2018 Town of Monroe Planning Board Workshop Meeting. May I have a roll call, please?
Lisa McQuaid,
Here.
Anthony Vaccaro is absent, Rich Triano,
Here.
Bonnie Franson,
Here.
James McKnight is late, Jason Sarinsky,
Here.
Jeff Manson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to point out the fire exits. This is actually a new room for me, but there's one at the top of the stairs and then one going out here the aisle corridor, as well as the store. Thank you, Noreen. First item on the agenda is Bald Hill Estates. There's a request for an extension. Hi, George.
Good evening. Haven't seen you in 6 months.
And here you are.
Bald Hill has been moving forward with the other agency approvals required. It's had submitted plans to the health department, got comments on the water treatment, water distribution system. It's making modifications to those plans. It has submitted plans to Orange County Sewer District. It has received comments, made modifications to those plans. It has resubmitted. We're waiting approval of the sewer distribution plan. We're in the process of preparing plans for submission to Orange County DPW for the various improvements we're making. We are working with the town engineer to finalize the dedication document required. We are working with the surveyor to prepare the deeds and descriptions. As you recall, or may not recall, there are easements required for sewer and for water infrastructure. That's been delayed because we had to wait until we got the corresponding approvals from those agencies for those locations. So I think we're moving forward as rapidly as could be expected for this particular project. It's complex, it's fairly large, and it requires some time.
Okay. Mark and Mike, if you could.
The code gives the applicant 180 days from the date of approval to satisfy all conditions, but the board has the discretion to grant an additional 180-day time period, and I think that's the extension George is looking for, to complete satisfying the conditions.
Okay. And you've been in the loop as far as improvements and,
Yes, I'll verify. Nirali from Leonard Jackson's office had met with us a couple times, and we're working out details as they come up. So it's been active.
okay. Board members, are there any questions with regard to the extension?
I've got one. I guess my question's more or less for Mike. And Mark, will we be able to see the final plans after all these modifications that are coming from other agencies seen before you give them the big final stamp?
Well, they'll certainly be submitted for signature, but there's no board action required.
Okay,
But yes, there'll be a copy submitted to Town Hall. You can always look at it, sure.
absolutely. Thank you.
Should there be a formal resolution and a date certain? Is that something we could do for Tuesday, or I don't know if you had the opportunity to write anything up?
I think you can take the action now if you wanted it. I can measure the days later. It should be, one of the things we have to pin down is when the resolution, George gave it the date, when the resolution was entered in the office of the town clerk.
Okay.
So it should be 300, if you grant the 180-day extension, it should be 360 days from that time period.
Okay.
What was that date, George? I think I could probably do it right here.
For Bald Hill?
Yeah, the date the resolution was entered. I think I have it. I don't know if I wrote that email.
When it was filed with the town
March
clerk?
Yeah.
You sent it to me, right?
April 14th, it looks like.
April 14th. Let's go forward 360 days. That makes it April 9th, 2019. So the extension should be to April 9, 2019.
All right, I'll make a motion to extend the approval for Bald Hill Estates to April 9th, 2019. And I would like Mike to formalize a resolution, just so we have something on the file for the record. I'll make the motion. May I have a
Second
second? Jason? Could you please roll call?
James,
Yeah. Aye.
Bonnie,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Lisa,
Aye.
and Rich.
Aye.
And Anthony is absent.
All right, so Bald Hill Estates is extended, and we'll have a formal resolution to
Thank you.
document that.
Can I note one other matter, not that it needs to be addressed tonight? There are other restrictions. One is construction must commence within 2 years of that approval, and it must be complete within 3. Provisions like that apply very neatly to a small shopping center project, but they become very difficult for a residential site plan with this number of units. The county sewer department limits 50 permits per year. So if, as soon as you have 151 units, you can't possibly satisfy the 3-year condition. So if we're gonna make a list of things that perhaps the town board should address for change, perhaps extending the ability, or providing the ability to extend that 3-year period, which currently isn't written in the code, we may want to give that some consideration. It applies to this, it might ultimately apply to the next item on the agenda, Harriman Business Park. Similarly, a shopping center is not going to build out in 3 years. It's going to take 8, 10, 15 years if there are pad sites like that, and
Right.
those restrictions might be difficult to deal with. Nothing to do tonight, but I think it's worthy of some further exploration down the road.
Okay. And just for clarification, I wasn't aware of the 50 permit rule with Orange County Sewer District. Is that over the entirety of the district, or is that just
Each
Monroe's?
project,
An individual project cannot do
Correct.
more than 50 units? Okay. Thank you. The next item is FBG Realty Harriman Business Park Lot 4C, and it's another request for an extension.
It may be a request for extension, and it does illustrate Mike's point. The overall Harriman Business Park application was made in 1998. It received its first approval, I believe, in 2000, and it has been steadily moving forward ever since. Lot 4, which is the lot which has the Target and the pad site,
Mhm.
is up before you tonight. For discussion is an example of how it just takes a long time to accomplish.
George, this is the pad site that's in front of Target, that's at the corner?
Yes, it's
Oh.
at the corner of Deli Farm Road
Okay.
and Larkin Drive.
Okay.
I think some of the members were here for that, but not all. So basically, it's a, if I recall correctly, 11,600 square foot of retail space. It's, was approved by the board in 2016. The resolution actually is, I think, a little off. The resolution I have, which was filed, was dated September 13th, 2016.
Right,
There
but,
actually was a amendment that was made to the resolution before it was filed, and that was in October at the work session, because there was discussion of a lot of discussion happened in that particular, with regard to the bus shelter that's proposed there. The client was not sure about how to proceed with it, but we eventually agreed. That was approved at the October 4th, 2016 planning board work session, which I think should be the date of the resolution. The reason the resolution is important, the date of the resolution is important, is because that provision in your code may apply here as well. So you have 2 years from the date of the
Right.
resolution to start construction, and then you have 1 year to complete construction. As Mike pointed out, that makes a lot of sense for a standalone, small project. But for example, in this case, most of the site has been approved, not the building itself, but was approved as part of the original construction on Lot 4 in 2006. Water connections are in, the sewer connection is in, the base course for the pavement is down, curbs are in, the fire hydrants there, there is some landscaping. All that work was done 10 years ago. So we're in an unusual situation because your code says if you don't start construction within 2 years, the site plan approval expires. And what we're looking for here is a way to come to a reasonable conclusion about this specific site and this specific business park. What I originally thought was that you had the ability to extend that time for good cause shown. And I think that may be something that should be there, but it's not currently there. So the second way to deal with the immediate issue would be to recognize that the site improvements have been constructed, and that should count towards the construction of the overall building.
So my question is this, because you came in, so I understand the overall concern about the 2 years with a large planned shopping center. This particular pad, though, received an approval for a building more recently, correct? For the specifics of it. So my question is, has any work been done specifically for this pad that subsequent to that approval? I understand that it was built initially because it's a planned development and there are connections and, for utilities, and there may have been some parking put in already, et cetera, but has any specific construction been done subsequent to, for this pad, subsequent to that approval?
If you look at the site plan and say, subsequent to, no.
Okay.
If you look at the site plan, all of the site work has actually been done except for the building for this overall pad. So the reason it hasn't been done is, I think, something the board is probably familiar with. There is a struggling retail market.
Mhm.
I can tell you they have been actively looking for uses to fill that space for the last 2 years. I've been involved in at least 3 discussions regarding potential uses that were being considered. For various reasons, they were not consummated in a lease. The client does not want to build a structure and then find out, finally leases it to something that requires modifications to the structure itself. It's currently set up on the site plan for I believe it's 5 front, divided into 5 tenant spaces.
Okay.
So those were just generic spaces, I think they're 2,000 feet each.
So sort of like where I guess Sally's, is it Sally's Nails, or there's a GNC or a footwear? There's a smaller building that's in front of, I don't know if it's Best Buy.
Used to be what I call Payless.
Okay, Payless. So, but there's 5 then tenants.
There was originally, I think, 2 in that space, but.
Okay.
So, the tenants sort of bound by the market
Mhm.
in terms of what they think they should, what they will
Mhm.
do to construct it. But at the same time, the market is, the people out there who are interested because there's an approved site plan that could be constructed. So if the site plan approval goes away, it makes it more difficult for
Right.
them to find a tenant. Then they have to come back to you and say, now we have a tenant, now can we do the site plan?
So again, when was the decision for the pad filed, do you think?
It was filed March 13th of 2017.
So it was it's very,
Because we were
still
trying to
very
work
recent,
through the
okay.
details of revising the conditions.
So I guess my question is, would it be useful from a time perspective rather than extending something now if it doesn't really fit, to just fill in a very simple site plan application form and then have us renew that, especially that's site plan application resolution, the approval resolution exactly as it is, so that the tolling starts again and it may give more time.
Well, if we come back with a tenant, it'll probably be modifying the building itself to suit the tenant. We'll have signage and different things that the planning board will probably want to see.
So you think they're gonna have to come back anyway?
Well, we're gonna come back anyway to take care of some details, I'm pretty sure.
Get to work and get that tenant before March. Get to work and get that tenant before March.
They've been trying since.
So,
Literally, they were marketing it before it got approved.
Right.
Final approval.
I'm just trying to, again, how does it fit within the zoning? And can an extension be granted? And if not, would it be cleaner? I really don't want to revisit what the planning board approved previously.
It's probably premature to grant the extension now because the 2 years has not expired. It won't until next March. But you know, the issue was there and will be if you want to wait.
Well, let's, why don't we wait so that the other opportunity that exists is that we had talked with the town board at some point that after a year of working with this new law, there may be edits that need to be made and changes now that we're working with it and see, areas that, could be refined.
This would definitely be one of them, because in most communities I work with, there is some authority to extend approvals when there's a need.
Right.
When there's a reason to do that.
Right.
You don't want blanket extensions.
I know there was none, so that was therefore why it was put into place, but I think
It's kind of
something
analogous
reasonable.
to the provision of the town law that gave the maximum period of time a conditional final subdivision approval could be extended to 360 days, an original 180 plus 180-day extension. And frankly, very often, a developer can't get his other agency approvals within that time period.
Right.
Particularly if we're talking about the DEC, or worse yet, the New York City DEC, if you're near the water tunnel. And also, market conditions sometimes cause a developer not to want to file a map if he can't market those lots. So the legislature, this is
Right.
in Albany, changed that to grant planning boards the discretion to continue to extend it in 90-day increments rather
Right.
than 180, to keep it on a shorter leash where good cause was shown for the extension. That might be an approach that's worthy of consideration here.
I recall that was done, I think, during the recession, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there were a lot of issues with, projects that had stalled because no one was building at that point in time with the recession.
Bald Hill is an example. Bald Hill is an example.
Hmm.
The market wasn't there in 2010 and 11.
Right.
Another approach might be to say that in a shopping center or in a residential site plan that's being developed in phases or pieces, that site infrastructure work that's done in anticipation of building a future phase can satisfy the requirement of commencement of construction within 2 years.
Right.
Because really, the cart is before the horse here. This pad site already has its water line and sewer lines, it has a curb cut, I mean, a whole lot of things are already done there that if it were a discrete application, would have been done after.
Right.
Should it be treated differently? If the purpose of the requirement is to make sure the developer is truly committed to building the project, if the construction was done ahead of time, isn't that just as good? Now, I'm not dictating to the town board how they want to handle it, but there are other ways to approach it and still achieve the same goal, which is to keep applications. You don't want these applications to get approved and they come back
Right, we don't
30
want,
years later
right,
and
we don't
nobody
want
knows
stale
anything about it,
applications, so
so-
there has to be some reasonable
Yeah.
expiration
But
date.
maybe there's a way to make this a little bit more flexible.
Right. I don't argue with that. So, all right, so George, put on your calendar. So what's going to be our official expiration date? The March
It-
filing
yeah,
date?
It would be 2 years from that March date is when you have to start your construction. You said March 2017, so some date in
March
2019.
13, 2017.
So if you don't get a shovel in the ground and the code isn't changed, come back to see us. We miss you, Andy.
It ensures you come back, George. Anybody have, before you leave, George, anybody have any comments or questions?
What is the date again? What is the date again?
We measured
March
from
13th.
So 2 years would be March 12th or 13th, however you want to count it, 2019.
19, okay. Thank you.
I believe Rich and Lisa were here on the board when it got approved, but the rest of us are new, so we're not familiar with it.
I hope you're still around in 2019.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, George.
Thanks.
Next item on the agenda, Sherry Torah Pool. Good evening.
Good evening. John Queen from Lang & Tully for the applicant engineer. Isaac Walter from the congregation.
Hi there. So why don't you give us an overview of what is being proposed?
All right. So basically, Sherry Torah is an existing school located on Larkin Drive, or off of Larkin Drive. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the site, but it's been there for probably close to 20 years at this point. There's an existing driveway that comes off of Larkin Drive, probably a quarter mile south of County Route 105. And inside the property is an existing school building for boys, as well as a matzah factory and a temporary school for girls in the front of the property, which is the next application. I'll just give you the overview of what's going on. So the plan that's submitted for the pool is a proposal to construct 2 swimming pools to service the existing boys' building. And those pools would be located pretty much off the building in the lower, I'll call it right-hand corner. There'd be 2 pools. They're both 30 by 65 feet. They'd be put in side by side with each other. The pools would include 2 bathroom facilities, one for the boys, one for the girls, as well as a mechanical room. In that location.
Just a quick question. It's,
Both are for boys, sorry.
so what was the?
Both are for boys. Both pools
That's
are
what
for
I
boys,
thought.
yes.
When I heard the boys and girls, I wondered about that. Okay.
And that's basically why we're before you tonight. We did submit this to the building department.
Okay.
Who I believe referred us to you guys. Yeah. Then I only referred to.
My first question is just, and we'll let Mark and Mike, what their comments are, get into that, but on the transmittal letter, August 27, 2018, from your office, it says enclosed plans depict the overall site conditions with the proposed pool facility, and the second plan is a grading and utility plan for the pool facility. I just want to make sure, because I only had one sheet, so,
No, there's another one. When I went through them today, I was like, oh my God, I have a whole nother stack of
Oh, okay.
plans, what did I do?
so we didn't get them.
See what happens
All
when I
right.
go on vacation?
Yeah.
So just so you know, we didn't have that one plan, but we have them here.
All right, yeah, okay.
So we'll pass them
Basically, it's a close-up of the pool. Shows the water service, the sewer service, and the grading for it. So I apologize for that.
That's okay.
The original plan that was submitted was the more detailed plan, and I'd asked John to put together a plan that gives a perspective of where this portion of the site is for the overall project. So that was the reason for the second sheet.
You had both sets when I sent your package.
I have
Okay.
both.
I think we just, from a seeker perspective, because the EAF isn't quite filled out properly, does this even require, is this an accessory appurtenant structure that would fall under the 4,000 square feet that wouldn't require adherence to seeker, do we know?
I assume this is accessory to the existing approved boys' school, and that a swimming pool is customarily incidental to that use. That may be true, but the other issue, and I did write you a letter about it today, and it's long-winded, you don't need to digest the whole thing, but when the new code was enacted, religious use was no longer in the LI zoning district where this property is located. It wasn't specifically a listed use before either, but the town's approach was different then. But the new code makes clear that religious and educational uses are not among the permitted or special permit uses in the LI zone. However, there are elaborate code provisions that talk about what happened to uses that were legal before the new code came in and how they're treated. And depending upon how they came about, either the zoning board can grant an approval, and they call it a permit, not a variance, to expand or enlarge that use. Or in the case where a special permit was granted, and we did grant special permits, even though it wasn't a special permit use, then the planning board is given the authority because the use is treated as if it is conforming.
Right.
So we now have to, even though it's not a listed permitted use, the use is under the code approach a conforming use, and it is subject when, as Ben triggered in his letter, when there's an expansion, triggers the need for site plan approval. Now, your question is, in terms of secret, is this a type 2? If it's an accessory structure, because accessory structures that are customarily incidental are permitted, then I would think it's a type 2 action.
Right, I know there's one for non-residential uses, accessory and appurtenant. I don't know if it has that 4,000 square foot threshold, though. And if this is,
Mike, I have an extra copy of your letter from today. I can get this to John, right?
Sure.
I'm gonna pull up seeker regs. I'll also just ask a question while we're looking this up. You have the New York State DEC wetland MO14 there, and you show a wetland limit line. When was that wetland last delineated or signed off by DEC? Do you have the DEC map, and are we within the timeframes that it's still
I don't know. I
valid?
would have the original site image.
Okay. I'd like to know if that's still valid, because we'll need to make sure that it is.
Okay.
Okay? And then the other comment I had was just simply with regard to the fencing, if we could see a detail of what that's going to look like. And I think, did you put the wall, you do have a section for the retaining wall.
There is.
Okay. Those are my comments. I don't know if the board members, do you have additional comments, questions? Is everybody just looking at it right now? Okay, all right. Mark, do you want to go through your memo then?
I've got some notes in final form, but I think the first question I'd ask the board is, are you going to treat this as a site plan amendment where you want to have plans to process and stamp, or is it going to be treated in another manner? Because that will affect how I believe the plans need to be modified.
My understanding was that, and I thought this was the case, the way that it was forwarded to us from Ben, I thought this required a site plan amendment.
I think that's what his letter said.
So we would, not that we have to have the full set of plans reproduced, but this would be an amendment to that site plan that had been previously approved.
That said, and I know there's a number of new members of the board that were not part of the prior review, and I'm sure Lisa and Rich remember the exhaustive traffic reviews that were done to consider traffic past the school trailers, truck traffic toward the matzah factory, to the boys' school. Those were all extremely pertinent and areas of concern for the board. None of that information that was on the Peterzak and FAO plans are on these plans. Now, that isn't a fatal flaw in my mind, because we can always, if we're treating this as an amendment, put a big block note, and I've done this with John in the past, indicating that this is an amendment to such and such approval, and only changes the following, and list what's being changed, but indicate that every other provision of the prior approval remains in full effect. so that when Ben has an enforcement issue, he doesn't have to rely on just the current amendment plan. He has the ability to rely on all the traffic control and provisions that the board spent months and months working on. I don't think it's necessary to copy all that over on here. It just would be time-consuming and I think candidly a waste of the applicant's money if we're able to do it the other way. So if Mike doesn't object with that approach, I would tailor my comments and work with John to make those references. The other question is, on the overall plan, John actually submitted two plans, both sheets 1 of 1. The overall plan was more meant as a convenience in case any of the board members weren't fully familiar with the site. Unfortunately, that plan doesn't show the trailers, doesn't show the matzah building. So the purpose for which I intended it isn't helping you much because it doesn't give you the orientation. So maybe a 11 by 17 Google map would be a better alternative. Just,
I think it's on the next one.
yeah.
See, we're piecing this together, I understand.
Yeah.
We're
So
piecing
if we can maybe work on just the detailed plan of the two pools and provide the appropriate notes to link the former application in this one.
Does the board think that's reasonable?
I do.
Yes? Yeah? I think that's reasonable.
Because a lot of my notes have to do with the drop-off lanes, the traffic flow, so we wouldn't have to worry about that. I know we have spoken, you spoke about the wetlands. We have to make sure we don't have any town wetland issues back in that portion near the
Corner, right.
pool.
Would we have to do another traffic study?
I don't know that you do, but I do want to look with John to make sure that there's no encroachment into the traffic lanes on your prior approval relative to the pool use. And one other critical thing is, and we may have to show it on the pool plan, is where the the pedestrian movements will occur. So maybe they need to have a striped-out crosswalk or something, just so the drivers know, warn them to slow down. 'Cause
Right.
that was a concern on the prior application,
We spent a lot of time on that.
a lot. And I think it was time well spent.
Yeah.
And we just want to carry it forward. There's a confusing issue where, and John, where you show the sanitary pump station of the pool discharging to something that appears to show on your plan as a septic tank. It may be a receiving manhole that goes maybe to another pump station and pumps up. So just check to see if maybe the septic tanks were abandoned and maybe there's a,
Yeah, we're pumping to another station.
yeah, so the notes on the plan still show septic tank.
Okay.
Is this chlorinated water? It's going to be like a pool of
Yeah.
with chlorine? And so the water, when it discharges, it goes into the sewer system? It's not going to be just cleaned out and discharged to the wetland?
Should be pumped in.
It's going to
backwash.
daylight. It's not going to the sewer.
Backwash?
The
backwash, the mechanical room and the bathrooms all go to sewer.
Okay.
They're all linked across the back. So there's a bathroom on either side, and the center is the mechanical room for both pools.
Yeah, so
So
that,
if there's any backwashing or discharge, that all drains, goes into the sanitary, the two bathrooms, over to a small pump station, and that pumps.
Okay.
should be no discharge into the open.
Yeah, there's no.
Right, okay,
Surface.
okay. And I think once we get to approval conditions, then we should add that specifically as a reminder to the applicant. Is there a Department of Health approval required for this?
Yes.
Okay,
So that, my experience is you want to add that as a condition of approval because I don't know that we need to get tied down with how long it takes them to get the pools themselves approved.
They do already have the approval for them, so.
You're way ahead of us.
do you have a copy of that, or you've already submitted it?
we have already. I will submit it.
Okay,
If you could, John, on your detailed plan, just reference the actual source of the topo.
Yep.
It just says that it's provided by owner, but the client, we really want to know what surveyor did it.
I have no problem with the plans doing, as Mark suggested, which is reference the conditions that the other plan, similar to the resolution, can. I did chat briefly with Mark. I don't know that this fits under the 4,000 square foot type 2, and I don't see any other type 2 that apply.
well, I was gonna ask that, because there's also that, routine activities of educational institutions.
I don't know
I
what-
forgot about that
what
one, and then I was
say.
going through it. So it's routine activities of educational institutions, including expansion of existing facilities by less than 10,000 square feet of gross floor area and school closings, but not changes in use related to such closings. And then it gives examples as, these include construction of new elevators, storage space, new classrooms, elevators, special facilities, libraries, lunchrooms, special ed,
Yeah, all right.
I think it would fall under that.
greenhouses, pole barns. So,
And it's nice that they use the number 10,000, since the two pools are just under 4,000.
okay.
So the 10,000 gives them the liberty for the mechanical room and the bathrooms, and even if we look hard and add in the concrete patios or the surfaces around the pools,
We're probably under the 10,000.
probably be under the 10 at that point.
Okay, so we should just confirm that it's under the 10, so then seeker, I think this would be
That's
exempt.
simple.
Yep.
I have a question. Is this an indoor pool?
No.
So where are the buildings gonna be that are gonna contain the bathrooms and, the maintenance that you talked about?
There, you have you walk in, you have the fence there, you walk in, you have the two pools, and then behind them is the building, two bathrooms on either side, and the center would be mechanical. Those are,
Those are what?
those are enclosed, those are
Okay,
built.
thank you.
My next note was relative to the retaining walls. We've got some very tall retaining walls here, up around 14 feet. And of course, as the chairwoman asked, we're going to get some details on the fence. But the retaining walls don't show going behind your bathroom mechanical room building. Is that going to be a structural wall? So maybe just call out that that's going to be, effectively, that's going to be a structural retaining wall as part of the building structure. So just, that way Ben will know that he has to review that as such. And it will have to be appropriately designed. There's a detail for parking lot restoration. I'm assuming that's for the force main?
So the force main and the water service.
Okay, that's what I
And
thought.
we are doing some additional, we're just squaring off the main and all that.
Okay. So I think if we get those done, since the board has bought into the approach, as it may be that I'm suggesting, if we can get that on and the other comments from the board, and then an approval box on here with the appropriate project number, I think the single sheet will work fine. The other one I asked for, but I defer to a Google map if you want to get orientation, because this one is missing what I hope to have included.
Okay. Site plan does not require public hearing, so we can think about whether we need a public hearing for this accessory structure. But the other item is that this is a site plan amendment, and other than for single-family dwellings, the planning board has ARB review authority. Do you have a sense of what those buildings or pertinent structures are going to look like? Do you have a design for them or an example?
No, they want to see,
Is what will, I don't know, is the fencing going to encompass and screen the entirety, including those small buildings?
no. No, right
Okay.
now I have the fencing going around the pools, and then they look into the front of the buildings, like the buildings are accessible
Okay.
inside the
But
pool
the,
area.
but the front of the pool area
We'll have a fence.
will have a fence, the retaining walls will have a fence.
Correct.
So you'll basically, unless you're looking at it from the back side, the fence would probably screen the pools and the
Yes,
bathroom
yes.
and
It's screened on
mechanical
three
building.
sides, and then the building screens it on the rear.
3 sides.
The back, well, over three, because only part of the back doesn't have a fence with the area with the building.
Basically, the fence is gonna go, these are the buildings. The fence will go like this.
Okay, so how does one gain access? Where's the door?
There's gonna be gates here.
All right, we should probably show those, the gates. And I would like to see a detail of the fence, just what you're proposing to do.
Yeah.
And I assume it's gonna be, 100% opaque, that you're not gonna want people to see in, so that's the intent?
I will provide pictures of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what, I don't know what the code is, I don't know if we can have it so that you can't see them from the front,
Right,
just in case, something emergency or something, so we'll get you a report.
okay. Yeah, just if we could add a detail and something that's more on the aesthetically attractive side.
Yeah, rather than just a picture, have John put it on the plans, because Ben doesn't want to have disconnected pieces to the application.
Right, and that's fair. So you're thinking that the bathroom building won't be visible? It'll be obscured?
You'll have the fence in the front, and that's all the way in the back, so you probably will see it, because it's gonna be a little taller than the fence. The fence will probably be, it's gotta be minimum 4, most likely it'll be 6, but the buildings will probably be 8 foot tall.
What's the vegetation in that area? Are there any trees?
I believe there are, yes, basically halfway to the middle of the pool's back.
Okay, we need to check with the tree law, just to see whether we have to scope out any of the trees. I don't know if they,
It's cleared already.
Oh, clear?
Cleared already.
I know I went there and I saw that there was,
See, what happened is, we thought this was a building department application. for
Right.
something, for a pool. So
right,
They went, they did that, and they cleared, and then Ben came back and said, we can't do this, you have to go
Okay.
to the planning board. So the original was a line through the center.
I cleared it, and then I went to the health department. And once I got my approvals, I went to Ben, and then I got the denial letter from Ben.
okay. So maybe, John, if you could just confirm that there aren't trees there?
Yeah, I mean,
Because it needs a review by the E EMC.
The structure that's gonna contain bathrooms, that's 2 bathrooms,
it's 2 separate bathrooms.
2 separate bathrooms. Is there gonna be like a changing area? Is it-
No.
So it's just a bathroom, do you have like stalls, or how many toilets, or a layout as far
Right
as how
now,
much?
we have 4 stalls per bathroom.
And then, is there a depth as far as the pool? I don't know if we have guidelines on how deep it can be.
How deep?
5 feet.
Is there-
What?
All around?
No, it starts with two, and it goes down. 1.5, it goes down until 5.
Typical in-ground pool, you'll start, it has
Right.
steps in the front, and then you'll go down, and then I think whatever the max step is.
The edges,
The
the
max
smaller
start,
go to
yeah.
the front.
Yeah, so you get the gradual down, and then,
Right.
the rope goes across the shallow end to
Gotcha.
delineate between the two.
What's the depth of these pools? Are they both the same size and same
Yeah.
depth?
Yes.
Standard, they're gonna be concrete or concrete
Gunite.
pools?
It's a special concrete.
Okay. What's a special concrete?
It's called gunite.
Oh, the gunite, okay, gotcha. Is that I'm not sure what this line is that's going through this looks like a landscape island and then going through the pool facility. Is that a swale? Not sure what this line type is.
That's the water service.
Oh, that's the water line.
Water service.
Okay. So if you just let us know what the materials are going to be for the buildings,
Sure.
you know, an example.
John, one other safety issue you can add along the, I guess it would be the northeast face, the front face of the fence line, is bollards. And it may be that you can put the fence into bollards, because if I remember the traffic pattern correctly, the school buses loop around the boys' school. And God forbid, one of the buses has a mechanical problem or a driver has a physical problem, it could go through a weak fence and find its way into where all the children are. So I think the front area should be all bollards
Protected.
protected.
Okay.
So they can't turn around, they have to go around, right? As I remember, the buses couldn't turn around,
I-
they had to go around.
No, I actually have a little, they have a loop, and actually the buses come in off of Larkin and turn left and basically go right in front of this area and then loop around clockwise around the boys' school. So the vulnerability is probably that northeast corner, and if somebody decided to take the bus around backwards, which would probably mean they're not the right driver anyway, they could impact to the front of this. So I think just from a safety standpoint, that front area should be protected.
Any other comments or questions from the board, looking at this? Is the occupancy based on Department of Health standards? How was the 115 established?
Yes,
Based on the square footage of the pool.
Okay.
they putting a,
So many persons are equal to so many square.
Now, why two as opposed to one big one? Is it different ages, or any reason why the two versus one?
different ages, and to make one big one, it's expensive. We need to build
Okay.
a system.
So it's actually less expensive to do the
Yes,
two?
Plus, different ages. That's why we have a fence in the middle.
Okay,
It's two different ages going.
So it's hard to see.
okay. All right, so I guess next steps, we don't have to, well, you'll confirm that it's under the 10,000 square feet, so then we won't have to address seeker. And you'll make the changes that have been noted. And Mark, do you have to get into a more detailed review that you'll be
Yeah,
sending out?
I'll put this into a final form
Okay.
and have that available for the meeting.
Okay. And then, Mike, so this had a special permit, therefore we
Yeah,
can
falls
act on
that
it.
side of the fence that stays with the planning board.
Okay,
My notes reflect that we granted special permits and site plan for all of the prior Cherry Tour appeals.
okay. And I'm going to make the comment for this one as well as for the girls' school. There's some big potholes out there in the access drive. If we could fill them in, please. Thank you.
Maybe they can use them for pools.
They're not that big. It might be one person.
Mini pool.
So, I think that's it with the pool.
Just one general comment. I was a former swimmer. Your pool is about 10 feet short of competition length. I don't know if that's something you guys are planning on doing, but just FYI.
Is this gonna be used during school, like during school hours, or is this something that'll be used on the weekends? Like, what's the use of it?
No, but school hours.
During school
Yeah,
hours.
they're starting, let's say, 11 o'clock in the morning. till-
And then, do the children go to school, like, I would say in the summertime, when, June, July, August, when people are using pools? Will the students be there?
When will they use the pools seasonally? During the summer?
Summertime, yeah.
Okay. So obviously not in the winter
No,
and,
of course,
right,
It's outdoor.
okay.
And then, do you have, safety measures as far as lifeguards, or?
Of course, the health department require that. We can't occupy it without a lifeguard. They're coming in the middle of the summer to make inspections. Unexpected.
Thank you.
And there aren't any lights or anything proposed because it's going to be used seasonally during the day, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Unless the town wanna go at nights. Unless the town wanna go at nights.
You could put the lights in the pool,
Basically-
illuminate it.
Basically, the next meeting can be there.
Meeting right there.
All right. So I think we've covered the pool. And are you up here for the temporary school trailers as well?
You're stuck with me, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, you get
that's all right.
comfortable. You're gonna be there a while. So are you coming back for the 18th meeting, or are you gonna be looking at October?
Probably, I know what I would like to say. I think October, because I.
All right,
I
so
gotta-
the submittal date is the 27th of September for
Because I gotta
October.
confirm that with.
Okay.
Okay. September 27th for the October meeting, which is October 11th. We should be back at the senior center by then.
Right now, lights, right. So when you're ready, John, you can give us an overview of what's proposed as far as the trailers.
Basically, we're at the same site, except now we're in the front of the site. Where it is a different tax parcel, but it is associated with the school. Currently on the front parcel, there's an existing school that was constructed temporarily with trailers. There are 11 trailers there that consist of 14 classrooms that currently have 280 children. The Sherry Torres School is in desire of consequences for space. As you know, the board has reviewed two schools, Glenwood 1 and Glenwood 2, which is in association with with this school, because the temporary school here is for girls. Glenwood 1 and Glenwood 2 are for girls. So Glenwood 1 was built, that's pretty much up, running operational at capacity. And Glenwood 2 was just recently approved, and that is starting to get the ball rolling in construction. And in the interim, there is a crunch for space. So we would like to propose an extension of the temporary school here by constructing a 60 by 94 foot extension with additional trailers. It would consist of 8 trailers, which would have 6 classrooms and 2 offices, 1 for teachers and 1 for the principal of the school. And it would consist of 120 students, which is currently the overflow that the school is witnessing right now. So our proposal was to basically extend the new trailers right along with the old trailers, and the footprint of the existing recreation area. What I did show on here was the relocation of the recreation area to the back of the new trailer. And that's generally the proposal that we have before you, is to get this extended and expanded. I think there's history, read the prior resolution, I'm fairly familiar with it, but that was some time ago, so I would defer to Mike for until the prior approval. But that's basically our goal, is to get another temporary extension here until we can get Glenwood 2 operational.
So I was looking at the regulations. Temporary trailers are regulated in accordance with, excuse me, 5738I. And it says, temporary trailers in advance of site plan approval. No temporary trailer shall be permitted or occupied except in accordance with these provisions. Where a site plan application has been submitted to the planning board for expansion of an existing non-residential use permitted in the zoning district in which the use is to be located, building inspector may issue a temporary permit for no more than 5 trailers for a period not to exceed a total of 3 years, subject to planning board review and approval of the proposed location of said temporary trailers. No single trailer shall exceed 24 feet in width by 36 feet in length. Depending on the number of trailers proposed and the use which will temporarily occupy same, the planning board in its discretion may require the submission of a site plan in connection with the review and approval of the temporary permit. They'll be located in a place which is easily accessible to emergency service vehicles, connected to sewer and water service as required, and shall not require the removal or result in any damage to existing on-site trees. Trailers may be occupied during the term of the temporary permit only upon the property for which a site plan application has been submitted. Planning board may attach to its approval whatever conditions are deemed necessary to carry out the intent of this section. Maximum occupancy of each trailer shall be established by the planning board and duly noted on the temporary permit, which will be posted on each trailer. And then you have to meet all applicable building code or relevant regulatory requirements. And they're not permitted in conjunction with any residential use or the construction of a new use, building, or structure on a lot without existing improvements. So, based on that, number one, there's a limit to the size of each trailer. So I don't know what the existing trailers are, because the existing school there, the temporary school I can see, is made up of trailers, multiple trailers. There's a limit of 5. It does talk about, for a site plan, that these trailers are related to an activity that appears to be on site, whereas this is for Glenwood. I don't think what you're proposing is unreasonable, because I know you're constructing Glenwood. But I'm going to have to defer to Mike as to how to address that. And it appears that this is just site plan approval, so there's no public hearing. You know, ultimately, we just approve it, and then the engineers would review it, and Ben would issue the permit. So I was out there. In the area that you're proposing the trailers, it's just grassy area, so there's no issue with trees. The fenced-in areas, I would assume the fence is going to be taken down?
Correct.
And then, are you saying that another recreational area of the same size will be added?
Yes.
Okay. And that'll be shown, because my map, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I I didn't show it, it'll be attached to the new footprint, and it'll go in similar fashion as the one.
Okay. Just so people know, the two boxes that are below the proposed trailers, those are like sand pits, sand play areas. There is a swale that's running through that area where they say proposed trailers. It's just, it looks like it's a swale that's gathering stormwater runoff, and then it enters into that ditch that's along the existing property line. So I don't know if there's a water flow, you know, why that's there, if that was intended, and if it needs to be moved. You know, I don't know how you accommodate what's there. It's not a large swell, but you could tell it's intentionally graded to handle runoff. Maybe it just needs to be relocated. I don't know, you have to
Yeah,
look at it,
They might have just done that and make sure that that area drained,
so that it wouldn't go toward the,
for the trailers or pond there for the rec area.
the trailers are going to essentially connect together. There's no space between them, right? So how does one get entrance to the proposed trailers? Is it gonna be a separate entrance?
There's gonna be two side entrances. It's gonna be a mirror of the existing.
Okay.
Where you see there's a little bump out and stairs on either end.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be those on this one as well.
Okay, but internally, it's not as if you're gonna be able to get access from the new,
We're gonna use the bathrooms from the old building,
okay.
the facilities from the old building.
But there's not an opening
We're
in
gonna make the
between?
opening, yeah,
There will be?
yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm gonna defer to Ben and to the engineer, because you would need to make an opening on the end of one of the trailers to be able to gain access. And I don't know if everything is classroom space along where they would join up, but,
We're gonna provide us with an exactly how we're gonna do it.
okay, that'd be great.
I think probably, based on the footprint, the end will probably be modified to line up, and then usually where there would be a window, they would just cut a door in there. And as the trailers are connected, the two doors would be on either end.
Okay. So water and sewer, you're saying they're gonna use the existing bathrooms. You know, I'll defer to Ben as to what is required for, this temporary situation and educational institution. We talked about the fence and access for emergency. That's why I was questioning the fence. How do you get into that trailer? And those are my comments for now. Board members, do you have any comments and questions? Anyone? Mark or Mike?
Is the fenced-in area, this is the playground, is that moving closer to Larkin Drive, or is it moving
Yeah,
to this?
I'm proposing to move it basically from the back of the proposed trailers back.
Does it get it all close to Larkin Drive?
Back
or you-
towards Larkin?
Yes. Yeah, I think at the end, it's about roughly 70 feet. So if you go 70 feet off that, you'll be probably about, you'll be about 90 feet from Larkin.
John, it appears that the trailer exceeds the 24 by 36 foot maximum dimension.
Yeah, that was, because what I did was I went off of the prior,
The code is
prior
changed.
code change.
So you either gotta reduce its size, or you need to seek a variance.
And there's a maximum of 5. And it I think you said 8. Yeah.
I didn't realize that the code had this specific provision in it.
How many are there now?
11. I didn't realize
11,
that.
what size? So it'd be 60 by 94?
Same. Well, it's actually a little bigger. It's about 120 by 60.
So 24 by 36, your length going this way is 60, right? And this is 94?
Yep.
Okay, so it's exceeding the size. Can you work with the 24 by 36?
You'd need a greater number.
Right,
I
but,
would think that the
Well,
same-
yeah, we would, in order to get the square footage we need, you're limited to 5 trailers and only 24 by 36, basically.
I was wondering whether they could start with 5 24 by 36, and then you go off to the ZBA so you get some capacity to
Okay.
start.
I think
But that,
that's-
I don't know if that's, gonna be more of a difficulty than,
Well, part of the problem is what's there already, I know it's legal.
right,
But it already exceeds. Now you're gonna add
Something is,
more.
if each trailer, no single trailer shall exceed 24 by 36, and you can only have 5.
mm-hmm,
If we got 5 trailers that were 24 by 36, it's actually bigger than, square footage wise, the footprint would change. Instead of being 60 by 94, it would be, you would do 5 trailers of 24 feet by 36. Unless I'm
that's 4,320, right?
correct.
So it's more the configuration than,
I mean, it's close, I mean, it's only like 1,200 to 1,300 square feet long. So
Right.
It's not a vast, it makes it seem like it's a vast difference, but it's really not.
no, it's more it's the shape of the trailers, not the,
Correct.
Right.
Not the footprint, so.
so you're pretty
that's-
close. You're going to get,
You'll get the 5 by 24 by 36, it'll reduce this footprint
How much of a thousand square?
1,320 square feet.
less.
That's less. But that would be well,
But the problem remains, although the existing trailers are permitted to stay because they're protected under the code provision. When we add more, I think you have to look at the entire operation and whether it complies with the restrictions of this section. If it doesn't, then variance relief is required.
so those aren't considered grandfathered then? It's a total, you think
Well,
it's
I think
cumulative
it
of
is
5?
grandfathered, but it's grandfathered, well, once you expand it, well, maybe the zoning board has to interpret it. I don't know how that can, you can't treat it as if it's 2 separate applications, it's one. And if it exceeds.
Oh, because they're also asking for an extension of the existing 11.
Well, they are, yeah. Now, I suppose if you didn't grant an extension of that, and they were just gonna build the new ones, then there wouldn't be a problem. But you gotta look at the whole site. When all is said and done, they're gonna have 16 trailers, not 5.
Right.
I don't know how you do that under this section.
Actually, they want 19. Because they want 8 plus
They-
the 11.
Okay.
Right.
But even if we cut it, even
Yeah.
if I made it conforming by making 5 at 24 by 36, we still end up with.
So what's the requirement for the existing? They have to be renewed? Well, they were approved previous to this zoning law, and,
But in your resolution specifically, you gave it a 5-year duration. Now, I'm having trouble figuring out when that expired, because the last resolution I saw that granted it was 2012, but I believe it was extended at some point. I don't have the notes to show me that. We have to find that in the file.
do you recall, did you get an extension of?
No, it starts from when we got the C of O. So it took us, whatever, 2 years to get a C of O, whatever.
Do you remember what the date is for the C of O? Do you have that information?
I don't remember, they have it, whatever, we need to look it up, but we calculating 5 years from when we got the C of O, from when we moved in.
So you were granted already, not that I'm familiar with it, but 5 years from issuance of a C of O.
Yeah,
And is that time period up
that's finished now September,
in September?
yeah.
Okay.
Now, you could always further extend it.
When you mentioned each trailer would have 6 classrooms and 2 offices, is it possible to, maybe, consolidate some of the offices to make up for that 1,000 or so square feet that you'll be losing?
Yeah, I think we could conform to the square footage, but then we're back to what we're discussing now is the original 11.
Right.
So,
And I
this is
just,
a way to,
right, I don't have enough history of the 11. So at some point in time, 11 were approved by temporary permit. I don't remember if it was a trailer provision in the previous law or if it was just something that was granted site plan.
I think it was just because it was a religious education use.
Was it, and it was intended at that time to be temporary?
Oh, yes.
It was always going to be. And the conditions had a 5-year expiration time period. I don't know, I'm relying on Mike only because I don't have this institutional history of intent
Well,
and,
Part of the odd part about the language, and maybe the zoning board will take a different read of it than I, is it treats uses that are no longer permitted, but legal when approved, differently depending upon the nature of the approval that they originally had. Now, if this did not have a special permit, then the zoning board is permitted to allow an expansion or enlargement. That would do away with the 24 by 36 arguably, and with the 5-year limitation. But it was a special permit, and when it is, then authority is given to the planning board, and that authority is to
this is as per your
It's
memo.
granted because you treat it as a conforming use, so the use is no longer a problem, but it has to comply with the bulk provisions of the code, like this 5738I.
Right.
So there's a limitation on the number and the size of the trailers. That the only body that can give relief from that is the zoning board by way of area variance.
Were the 11 trailers constructed for Glenwood 1 originally? Did they precede Glenwood 1?
I think by a long shot. They were a solution long before Glenwood was ever presented to the planning board. It may have been part of your long-range plan, but they were not mentioned in terms of a Glenwood school. Glenwood became where they began to look after they had the temporary trailers, is the way I remember.
So you'd been operating at the temporary school and then constructed Glenwood, but that
But Glenwood's
reached
not enough.
occupancy right away, so then you
We never had
have
enough.
Glenwood 2.
Now we have Glenwood 2, which
Right,
That's why we started Glenwood 2, because we see we don't have the space.
The other
right.
thing the planning board had been asking for was, what is your long-range plan to solve this problem so we're not in a continual situation where we have temporary trailers? Now,
Right.
A lot of school districts have the same problem, but I think we're looking for a way to make sure that this is gonna go away someday.
Right, and that was the intent
But
when
we
this
don't
was
see-
written.
We don't see any option. I wish we have an option how to stop it, you know? People
Because
growing
we
kids.
just-
Did you actually have you begun construction on Glenwood 2
Glenwood 2, we finishing now the building plans. We hopefully in next 2 weeks, we're gonna submit it for Ben,
to Ben?
the floor plans,
Okay.
the structural.
it takes about 4 to 5 years from approvals through construction to get the school fully operational.
Now, recognize
So you
also
plan-
this section is itself temporary.
Right.
This isn't a permanent solution, and
Correct.
it's allowed for the building inspector to authorize the temporary trailers, provided that you have a site plan application pending for some permanent structure. I don't think that we have that here. Now, if we want to continue the existing temporary school, because that is a conforming use, I would see no problem in your extending that durational provision. But I have trouble seeing how you can add a whole bunch more trailers now that I read this section. Unless we say they're not temporary trailers within the meaning of this section, because this refers to temporary trailers in advance of the site plan approval for a permanent solution.
Right.
These are temporary trailers to address the Glenwood situation, so they're not bound by these restrictions. That's the stretch.
Right.
What is the plan for how long these temporary trailers are supposed to be there? Is there a goal or a long-range plan of how long you plan on having them there?
Our goal is we're gonna start building Glenwood 2. Once we have Glenwood 2, we can have the grills.
I thought you said like 5 years. Is that the plan for the
Takes
trailers?
us time, between 4 to 5 years to build a building.
Basically, what happened through Glenwood 1 took about 5 years.
Okay.
So we're anticipating 2 would be about the same.
At that point, you could shut down all of these trailers.
Yes, all of these students would go to Glenwood 2. that point in time, the boys' school here most likely will need room. And we would probably look to propose a permanent building at the spot for the boys.
Well, then if we look at the language of the code, the way I outlined it for you in my letter, this temporary trailer operation is regarded as a conforming use,
Okay,
temporary though it be. Since this section can be argued doesn't bind, because it's a different context. It's when I'm gonna build a school and I wanna put temporary trailers on site, that this comes into being. This is addressing a longstanding problem that the planning board has had sympathy toward. And we're gonna say we're gonna continue the temporary trailer use and allow you to add some more, but give it an absolute sunset provision, perhaps tied to 90 days after issuance of the CO for Glenwood 2, so that it really is going to come to an end. I think that's the objective, that we want to see these temporary trailer schools brought to an end.
right. From my perspective, I think these provisions were intended to apply
To
to,
this,
yeah,
okay.
but I don't know that they were intended to apply to what already existed. I think this was for new trailers to be placed. And I think it's reasonable because this is related to a site plan. It's approved, they're going to construct, so from my perspective, I
But if it
don't,
applies, then it's
So-
dimensional provisions apply, the number and the size.
correct. So I guess that goes back to, do we just consider what already exists as having been grandfathered and these new provisions are dealing with the new trailers? Is that a reasonable interpretation or not?
I think that's a way to make it work, I think, provided that you actually have a real end period.
Right.
Like the issuance of the CO when all of the trailers are gonna go away.
Right,
I mean, I think it's a stretch of the language, but I think it addresses the spirit of your old approval and certainly addresses the spirit of this new language.
and this time period is to end after 3 years, so it doesn't fit their 5 years, so you need to bring more people in and build it very quickly.
I guess you
Well,
wanna
you're
help
under
me build the building.
construction, right?
What?
So the 5-year, you haven't broken ground.
No. So, board members, what are your thoughts?
What are the age of the students that are in the trailers that are existing? Like what grades are they?
Nursery kindergarten.
Pardon me?
Small girls.
And then, so when Glenwood 2 is built, what ages students will go into that?
Nursery kindergarten, the small students and the big students.
So then who went into Glenwood 1? Like if there was 11 trailers there, was supposed to go into Glenwood 1, how did it get filled up so much? If you had those trailers, those students were supposed to go into that school. I mean, to say, we expect more students and build a bigger school, that's one thing, but the school was to provide for the students that were there. So who went into that school if there's still students in the trailers?
We had a lot of trailers in the village and then all the girls in the village moved to that building.
So Glenwood 1 is not kindergarten?
No,
So what grades would be in like Glenwood 1?
let's say from first grade till.
Third grade?
What?
I didn't understand.
First grade.
First?
I'm not sure how we're gonna split it exactly, but
Well, who's in there now though in Glenwood 1?
from nursery kindergarten, pre-1A, it's in the trailers, and then from first grade till then is in Glenwood.
First two,
First to the C, to 12. It's
Okay.
all, it's from first grade on till the end.
For
So there
Glenwood
was-
1?
there was other trailers that went into Glenwood 1 that
It
that
was
are
trailers in the
not on
village.
the
So these
site that
aren't
we're
just
talking
small
about?
kids.
Correct, I guess they had multiple trailers throughout the village at this location. When Glenwood was
Because
built,
I mean,
they consolidated all the trailers
In one
building.
On this site?
but it sounds like
You're
the
saying?
Glenwood 2 is a
Yes,
solution.
they
so
had all
that-
these other sites throughout the village that they consolidated, brought to Glenwood 1, got rid of those.
And Glenwood 1 is girls as well?
Yeah.
And this was the one that was left. Because this was-
Are there trailers on Glenwood 1?
No.
No, okay, sorry, I'm misinterpreting what you're saying. So you're saying all the children that were in the various trailers,
In the
the
village.
trailers went away because they got consolidated and they're attending now Glenwood 1. So this is the remaining site? Okay.
So the trailers that were not on the site that we're looking at now. There was other trailers
Correct.
that filled up the school.
Yes.
But now, are there other schools in trailers that we're not discussing tonight, that we're not aware of? In other words, when Glenwood Two was built, is that gonna get filled up and then these trailers are still gonna be occupied with
It's just
students?
simple, people have babies, each day and it's filling up, like, whatever.
Let me tell you. that-
So it is a little bit of expansion then, you're projecting the future as well?
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, just for instance, this expansion is needed because, they have more overflow, so,
Ha-
we need
how-
extra.
What's the capacity of
But then
Glenwood
later,
One?
there might be even more trailers that you would want.
What?
That's what we're concerned about. That in years, then maybe you'd want more trailers if
Well,
there's
we're
a
trying-
bigger thing.
We're fighting two battles. They're moving forward with new buildings to house the students. It just takes time. It takes years.
But I think what we're concerned with
So-
is that we don't want more trailers to come, even
Well,
after
to be
this.
honest, They don't want to, they would like for the girls to go to Glenwood.
I understand
because
that.
They need separate campuses, per se. So this is an awkward situation that's going on. So it is the ultimate goal to remove these trailers because the girls shouldn't be on the boys' campus.
So as part of an approval, can we say 3 years and that's it and all of it has to go?
Yes, you could certainly place an absolute durational provision.
We would really, I'd tell you 5 is what is going to get it done, just because we want to see what
Right.
we want.
Well,
So-
what I would say is the law actually says 3. So if they want 5, they really do need to go to the ZBA. But if you want to get granted 3 for now, and then they could still go to the ZBA, right?
Yes?
At year 2 or 3.
Is the 3 able to be extended or no? It's-
I don't
Not-
believe in this language.
It'd be a reapproval,
Yeah, not to exceed.
right?
The thing is that we have over 100 kids that are sitting at home, and the parents keep calling when
Right.
they can start sending. So
So with the extension, what would be the capacity? How many students could you educate in the?
New extension?
In the new extension, thank you.
120.
120. And this is what you're proposing to get you through 5 years till Glenwood 2 is ready, and you're already short 100 spaces. So if the proposed trailers went in tomorrow, most of that would be filled immediately.
Right.
You don't have enough capacity here to get you through 5 years. So what's your solution even to get to Glenwood 2? Forget about once Glenwood 2 is up and running. How are you gonna even get to that point?
we're using more classrooms above the mikvah. We're using also for grills. We have over there like 16 classrooms, so we're using that for grills too. So basically, Glenwood 2 is going to fit 1,000 kids. So once Glenwood 2 is going to be ready, we're going to take all over the grills from all over places and put it in one building. The place where the trailers is now, 5 years from now, we want to build a new building for the boys because we're going to need it for that time for the boys.
So what do you anticipate if you were to move in 5 years from now to Glenwood 2, and you have capacity for 1,000 students, how many students do you think you'd be moving in year 1?
That's what I was,
And
yeah.
When 5 years from now, what percentage of Glenwood 2 is going to be filled? 100%?
Right. When you open, how many children are going to be in
I
Glenwood?
don't think so. Are we thinking? I don't know.
So let's start. What's the capacity of the existing?
1,000 kids.
No. The capacity of the existing trailers. Do we know what the capacity is right now?
280.
280. And there are 280 children there now?
Yes.
Okay, and then if you were to get the trailers as configured, that would accommodate another 120. But if it's reduced, it may be like 100, let's say. Okay, so that's accommodating, that temporary area is accommodating 380 students. Those 380 are going to go into the
Glenwood 2.
Glenwood 2, which is for a capacity of 1,000, right? So that would leave 620, but you said there are other places where the girls are, so they're also coming in there?
Yeah. About 300 girls.
There's 300 girls in other facilities.
Yes.
So then you're at,
So if you moved into Glenwood 2 today, we're looking at about
120.
600 students plus immediately in the 1,000 capacity.
We had like 70%.
Okay.
5 years
Possible,
from now.
there might be additional school-age children by
Right.
then.
Yeah, but, you know, it's, again, it's that balance of,
Yeah, but you need to understand, girls going out too. They got married and they're not
Right,
staying
right.
there.
Right, absolutely.
But the trend has been increasing because, you know, people get married, they have children, they're staying in place, get married again, have children. So for the most part, it's increasing,
Right.
even though some are coming out of the school as well.
Can you just explain where the location for Glenwood 2 is going to be in comparison to Glenwood 1?
Right next.
They're literally adjacent.
It's a one property.
Okay. On that property, is there capacity
It has
for a
place-
Glenwood 3 someday?
Yes, it has place for one more building the same size.
Okay.
It wasn't approved, but there's
No, but
capacity
It's
for it.
capacity, so
But
our-
if-
Okay.
if it
So
were
let's see.
approved,
Let's see, if in 2-3 years from now, we're gonna see that we need the other building, we're gonna start early enough that whatever, we should be ready right away to build the other one.
So that's potentially at least part of the
Yes.
long-term solution. Like you said, you want to get everybody on one campus, all the
Right.
girls on one campus.
A one section, and
Okay.
the boys are in Larkin,
Alright,
and the
makes
girls
sense.
are in Glenwood.
Can you do that without an extra round of trailers? If
Oh, I
we,
think
because
there'll
if
be
we
more
put this
trailers.
3-year limit on and then we're getting rid of trailers,
Capacity what they're asking for.
I'm saying, I don't know how you can move into, eventually into Glenwood 3 without proposing more trailers. You know what I mean?
I think we're looking, it's good to look down the road. We really can't predict what population we're gonna be at. We can only deal with what problem we have before us right now. Before us right now is, we need to get Glenwood 2 built, and we need to get these girls here to Glenwood 2. We need this space now. And it looks like as part of whatever approval we get, it's gonna be limited to 3 years and whatever other conditions you set, and it could be that, you know, after 3 years, this site is.
What is the capacity above, this floor above the mikveh, student-wise?
325.
So that 325 was another approval the board granted that was intended as flex space. It was
Overflow.
intended initially as for the girls. When Glenwood 2 was completed, theoretically, that space would become available if it was needed for the boys' school while that was being expanded. So when the board entertained the modification of the second story of the mikveh with that 300-plus students, it was intended as flex space
Where is the mikveh?
on Forest.
Across the Glenwood School,
Right up
Across
near
from Glenwood?
Glenwood.
Okay.
next to the bus parking.
Before the overpass.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other item that was just, is that there was a changing of congregations, and there was a spike in school children attending one school versus another. And it looks like that happened over the last few years, and that has now settled out. So it was a new congregation that had formed. They had a spike in enrollment, a much higher enrollment, and now that has leveled off.
So the spike in enrollment within Glenwood.
Correct.
Okay.
They're still growing, but
Right.
not, you know, it's not the new school that everybody wanted to go to attend, so it has leveled off to less than the peak. So that's why we're still kind of dealing with this overflow issue.
Okay. Board, other questions?
Just on the fence again,
It's an existing fence, that's where the recreation area is.
Yeah.
So that'll be removed and pushed back.
does it become a safety concern at any point, the closer you get to Larkin Drive? I think isn't there a metal gate by the edge of this driveway? Is there like a guardrail type thing that you could put in, or is that even needed? I don't know how close it
I
is.
mean, it's, basically it'll work out, it'll still be about 80 to 100 feet off of Morgan Drive. And it's, you know, that whole section there is
But what about
wooded,
the
so-
playground?
Oh, it's
They're so
wooded as
close
well,
to
that's
the-
no, that helps. All right, no,
It's not a
thanks.
concern, but I don't think.
There should be a fence
No,
or
I
something
can't,
there.
I know much of that road is wooded, I just didn't know if that, all right.
With
no,
kids, there should be a fence or something there.
Well, the rec area will be fenced in.
They're moving the fence closer to the road, and my concern was if it was just a thin fence between a bunch of cars and kids playing, that would be a concern. But
John,
if
is
it's
the area-
100 feet and trees and everything else, then it's less of a concern. You know,
Is the area to the north of the trailers cleared at this point? I see looks like a partial wood line.
No, that area, I don't believe is clear.
Just wondering if that's a more appropriate location to the north side, which would keep the setback from Larkin the same. Ultimately, another application that little historical point, there was an application, or at least a plan submitted at one point for a permanent building for the boys' school, just to the north of these trailers. So it is the long-term intent to come in off of Larkin with a new development to the north of these trailers. So what I'm suggesting is they might want to look at creating the recreation area just to the north of the trailers. That way you maintain the setback from Larkin.
I didn't know.
If that works.
I didn't know if there was any specific approval condition that said that the space had to be a certain size or not, or if they just provided it because they needed it.
They provided it, and we did some investigation and coordination with the applicant in prior applications as to the applicability of state education department regulations, and this type of institution doesn't follow those guidelines, so.
Okay.
It was a matter of just providing a reasonable recreation area that the board was comfortable with.
Right.
So I think if they duplicate the play area in a similar size, I would suggest that they would be adequate.
There's a hedgerow, kind of a tree row by that ditch, which kind of separates that area where the sand pits are, but the sand pits are outside of the fence. And then in the fence, I just saw that it's basically just grassed area with some small inflatable pools were there, if I recall correctly. Yeah, so it wasn't really being used, other than maybe they were out there, playing in general.
Yeah, I think they go out and play in general, and
Right,
exert their energy and run around.
okay.
To try to reduce how close we get to Larkin Drive, I could also take a look at making almost like an L shape. Go a little bit to the north, try not to go into the tree line, and that would reduce the area, going towards Larkin.
Yeah.
Something.
I think we want it, well, and the regulations say to put it in a location where, trees don't have to come down, so
Yeah,
we
so
need
what
to
I'm saying
figure
is
out where to put it.
Instead of going all the way out to Larkin, I could do like a wraparound L a little bit and reduce that and get that distance greater.
Okay. Any more thoughts, board members? Any comments as far as, do you feel that the applicant has demonstrated need for the 5 trailers and that it's reasonable?
Per our code, I think 5 is perfect. Well, it's not perfect, but it's within our power to do so. Anything more than that, you gotta go to the ZBA, that's above our authority. And it's same thing as it relates to the space as well. We can approve what we can, and anything more than that needs to be referred to the higher ups. This is a one-time extension that, frankly, is supposed to solve the problem of these temporary structures. So this, was it 3 years? This 3 years, I think, is enough time to come up with some sort of strategic plan onto how to solve the temporary structure problem. So I think 3 years is enough time for you guys to come up with something. You have 3 years.
Anybody else feel like opining? Commenting? Thoughts?
We're talking we're talking 3 years,
Yes.
and we're gonna are we putting like a cap on the 3 years?
It's 3 years.
It's 3 years.
It's 3
'Cause
years.
it seems general, just say come up with something.
Right.
Can we put like some language like that?
So the code says 3 years, and it will be 3 years. The only way it would be more than 3 years is if they went to the zoning board of appeals.
Okay.
They always have the opportunity to seek a variance.
Of
The code
course.
says explicitly
Yes.
not to exceed 3 years.
Okay, that would be fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Is the plan that they would seek the variance during that 3-year period if they were gonna need more time than the 3 years?
They,
That's always
They
their
would
right.
they
have to-
can.
Yeah,
Can't.
okay,
They
I
would
mean,
have-
it's one way to handle it.
Okay.
I mean, it's,
We're not looking for it. We're definitely gonna try to rush up Glenwood too, but just.
yeah, but you can only, you can only rush stuff so much. I know
Okay.
people are pressuring you to rush it, and it sounds like a great idea, but stuff takes as long as it takes.
It's a
I
$10
mean,
million project, but we're gonna try as much as possible.
Yeah, but then if it takes longer, I guess my concern is the code says 3 years.
Right.
So if you come back here, I don't know if I can help.
Right.
So it would have to be the zoning group, okay, and you're aware of that.
You make
And-
your case with the zoning board of appeals for the
and
need.
I understand there's a lot of trailers, and that's not ideal, and there's probably gonna be more needed before Glenwood 2, because Glenwood 2 is even bigger than the configurations of these trailers, and the thing is growing gradually, and you can't control that either. That's the constant, not the
Right.
trailer slapping in
The-
there. So, but it's best to have these people, these kids in one place. If you interpret the rules differently and you move 2 trailers a couple miles down the road and have them be in some, and disjoint the school, I don't see, that doesn't help anybody.
Right.
That's the other option.
Right.
So are they gonna be the 24 by 36?
That's what's required.
Yeah, just if I could clarify for the record, we would amend the plan to conform to the code, so that it would be 5 trailers, no greater than 24 by 36, with the 3-year period.
Provision.
So then your configuration is gonna look a lot different than what we have here now?
No, the shaded trailer boxes would just get smaller by about
1,300
square feet.
Yeah.
Right, but if you put 24, I don't know how you're gonna configure it, but a 24-foot wide trailer, stack 5 of them, it's gonna be 120 feet, which is gonna pretty much be the same size as the existing trailers?
That's correct, it'll match the existing
So
trailer.
it's gonna
bed.
look a little different than what we're looking at?
Oh, It'll
And
look a little
then-
different, but it won't be as long.
It's not gonna go as far
So
out.
the 60 feet going back is only gonna be 36 feet?
That's correct.
There's actually a little more room for the playground there, too.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
One similar comment to the prior application. If you're going to treat this as an extension to an approval, this plan does not provide all the information that I discussed as part of the pool application. So I'll work with John to craft a nice bold note that also references the provisions of the prior approval. Because again, it was a terrific amount of time expended to discuss the drop-off areas for the school buses and drop-off zones and queuing of the buses and traffic flow. So we'll just note that that's all part of this approval that carries forward.
Okay. Are the trailers going to look the same as what's there for the most part, kind of the same look? All right.
Yes.
Because again, we have this ARB authority over it, so we want to know what you're actually putting up.
Yeah, they would look the same.
Okay. And Mike, any other thoughts?
No, I think it's similarly a type 2. Again, it's that expansion of under 10,000 feet of an educational.
Institution? Okay. Does it make sense, so is the board ready to take action this evening on the temporary trailers? We have a meeting on Tuesday as well, so I think,
I'd like to see us have an opportunity to review this between now and Tuesday at least. Get out on site if we choose to, and just get a little bit better of a look at this.
It'd be nice to have a plan that shows.
Yeah, I'd like to see a
I was
code
gonna say,
compliant
if I
drawing.
could get you a revised plan tomorrow.
okay.
As
I will
long as-
likely not have time to review a plan in that timeframe.
Someone else in the office, Sean, or, I think we could condition it on your,
Yeah. I mean,
have, you're reviewing
I'll
it.
update my comments probably tonight till midnight or 2. But I think if the approval is conditioned on all these elements, I can make sure the plans are
Okay.
correct, the
And-
final plans.
All right, and then I think that also gives Mike an opportunity if we need a resolution. Yeah, so we could do that on Tuesday. Okay?
So I'll get you the revised plan tomorrow, I'll drop off to Maureen, I'll send
Right.
it electronically. And then on Tuesday, we'd be reviewing and draft the resolution.
The fences are going to be the same? You're gonna reuse the fence or a new fence? Same fence, okay.
In the plans that we're looking at, what's directly behind the existing school, kind of like at the back? There's like what makes an L shape where you were gonna put the 60 by 94. So then if the configuration's gonna be 120 by 36, there's something in the way there?
I mean,
Is that-
the two dark
Yeah.
square, those are, they're like little sand pits. So
Those are the sand pits.
Oh, I
we'll
was wondering
relocate
what you
those.
meant by.
Yeah. They're like little sand play areas.
Sounds nice.
Oh, I thought you meant.
No.
Sorry about
Much
that.
nicer.
Sand play area. Rather than sand pits.
Thank you.
It's a little.
Yeah,
Like
from-
Yeah. These are hardy kids.
No, it's not.
I feel like I'm getting old. All right. All right, so the concept is you're going to get us an amended plan. We're going to make sure that the plan reflects that this is only related to the proposed trailer, nothing else is, and then you have to adhere to the requirements of the original site plan approval. And, again, you're gonna stick within the 3 years and no more than 5 trailers. And you'll show a rec area, and, I think that's it. And a fence, where the fence is going to go, the new fenced area.
Correct.
All right?
All right.
Okay. So Tuesday, you're able to join us Tuesday again? Okay. Oh, holidays. Okay. So we will take this up on Tuesday, and in the meantime, Mike can write up
We'll
something.
be praying that it shall get a vote, but it's much I can do.
So it's Yom
Holiday,
Kippur?
it's Yom Kippur.
Okay. So Happy New Year.
Say good night.
Okay.
Thanks,
Good night.
guys.
Good night.
Thank you.
John's still gonna sit there.
Oh, sorry. What was this for?
John sent it right before I was getting ready to leave, so I just printed it. I didn't even have a chance to read it.
Oh, for
Scunnamunk.
Okay.
So I just ran all the copies and threw it in my packet. Oh, I run extras of those anyway. He might have it in his packet.
Okay. So, John, next item is Scunnamunk subdivision.
Alright, where are we at?
And we have, members of the EMC board, you can fill us in on your site walk? Or no?
You should have a letter on that.
Oh, okay. We have a letter, so, all right, thanks. I wasn't sure if you had attended. Okay. All right. Hi, nice to meet you. Okay, great.
Great night to break.
Yeah. Nice meeting you. Welcome.
You were at the first sidewalk. Yes, but I thought there was one that followed that. There wasn't one that followed that.
I did not.
No, right.
I was at the first one.
Yeah.
With the EMC. Okay.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, not at our planning
No,
board.
right. I was there with them.
Okay.
At that time.
Okay.
He's up in the, control room.
So you want to let us know what's transpired and where we are?
Yeah, so basically, based on the sidewalk, we really didn't change the map all that much.
Okay.
We were hoping to discuss tonight any comments or changes that the board had. I did provide Mark with a general rough grading plan. It's not a final plan, but it just, it's basically just to prove that the lots are viable, we can get access to them. And really what we're waiting for is tonight's meeting feedback to go back and forth to find out, hopefully exactly, if you agree, disagree, or there's other areas that you would like to see modified, because based on that conversation, then.
I don't remember if I sent that to you guys or not.
No problem. Based on the discussions tonight, hopefully, your recommendations, we'd like to incorporate that into the plan and then begin our final, our final design. And that would be, the grading, the utilities, the stormwater, to make it a complete subdivision plan, to resubmit back to you for public hearing.
Mark, have you had a chance to take a look at this?
Yeah, I've got several notes.
Okay. Actually, I'm sorry, Mark, before you start, so members did have an opportunity to walk the site. Do you want to just express any of your thoughts and findings from the site visit that you want to highlight? Anyone?
My thoughts and concerns primarily focus around flooding, primarily in lot 4. It's kind of in a depression on the lot. It's hurricane season. New York's been known to get hurricanes every once in a while, and we have received a lot of rain. So I work in a real estate investment firm. in my private life, and one of the things that we look for is this something that we can maintain, both physically and as a customer as well. So we look for flooding. In this particular case, that struck out to me. I'm also concerned about flooding during construction as well. You're gonna have a lot of dirt. It's also on a hill going down a highly traveled road. The last thing we need is for mud to be flowing on that road and causing a lot of traffic to go on not nearly as traveled roads and disturbing those residents as well. I also see that as something that might happen as well after construction has been completed.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, from walking the site, I'm generally pleased with what you propose as far as what to preserve as far as wild areas. My biggest concern is between the adjacent properties, between I guess 4, 5, and 6 and Scunamunk, not a lot of tree cover there. Between that, I guess where the houses are going to go is a little closer to what the houses like on Ridgeway seem fairly set back on those properties. So it just seemed like those are going to be fairly close without a lot of screening between them. So that's just one kind of concern that I have, and I'm not sure how that can be addressed.
So between the individual dwellings?
Not between the individual dwellings and the adjacent properties, Ridgeway, Knoll,
Okay.
Schaefer.
Okay, so.
It just seemed like those houses are fairly set back close to where the houses are proposed to be on this plan.
Anyone else? My reaction was there was more rock out there than I had anticipated. So I have a general question with regard to the need for blasting to be able to accommodate some of the grading that's going on. There was what appeared to be this depressional area toward the front, near where the driveway comes in. I didn't know if that was actually on the site or not. We had talked about that. The other larger concern is that now that I see a grading plan, we have all this area that is shown as being conservation area, and there's a 50% requirement for the conservation area. But if I look at the grading plan, it looks like a lot of that's being graded out. And so my question is, there are trees shown within the conservation area. I don't know how much grading is being done, and in effect, are we grading out the trees?
Yeah, well, that's why we're at this point where this isn't the final. I wanted to prove that the lots were buildable.
Okay.
Regardless of the conservation areas, that they're buildable lots. That's
Okay.
part of that, the exercise that we're doing.
Okay.
So, now that I know what your concerns, and if you're okay with the areas we're proposing for conservation, now we have to go in and tweak each of the lots and get the grading out of there to preserve the conservation.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so you would make a plan to,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah, we didn't want to spend a lot of time doing this and then, like the layout of changing the road, moving things around, and we're back to square one. So we just wanted to prove out these lots to say, they're buildable.
Okay.
So that we've established our number. We're kind of doing this in reverse because we're going from a higher number to a lower number, so.
Right.
But that's what this plan was, it was to prove that the road grades would meet the town standards. So it was a.
Okay. So then you will grade out in a manner that we can save trees in that area. I think there was a discussion of maybe even a little walking path around the homes within that easement area. And based on planning board members' comments, it may be that we can supplement and add some trees in there for some screening between the neighbors and the new property, just to enhance.
Yeah, I was gonna say, log of Flint, everybody's on that too.
Sure. Anybody else that was at the site walk, thoughts? And again, just as far as the site walk is concerned, mine was the slope and sort of the rock that seemed to be outcrop, and I don't know if those are boulders or if that's actually rock outcrop.
I noticed the slope, and I was at the sidewalk, and so was Anthony, who's not here, and,
Okay.
just to note it.
All right, thank you. All right, Mark.
Before I go into all my notes, I'll kind of give a general overview. And I agree very much with the comment about concern for the drainage and how it would impact the homes. Lower lot number 4, if you look at this interim grading plan, I'll call it, there's actually 10 foot of fill around that house. So there are some things being done to bring that up. There's cut and fill. I don't know if it's a balance. I don't think John's gotten there yet. But one of the main concerns as we were walking around on a site visit, and actually Anthony and I were talking about it, was to try to get our arms around relative elevations, the elevations of the road, the transition into the driveways with a kind of a mini vertical curve for the driveway, the elevations of the first floor, which are shown here, the finished elevations, but then the actual elevations of the driveway. Is there a pad on the driveway? Are you coming out to a slope driveway? What kind of slope you're dealing with? So those are all very important issues that I did speak in the field to John about that really need to be incorporated into the final grading plan. We now are hearing that the grading plan that we're looking at really is not the grading plan because they're gonna try to avoid conservation areas. So I don't know until you have a grading plan that cures the issue of not disturbing too much of the conservation areas, closes, meaning that the proposed contours close with the existing, and there are some gaps along the, I don't know what, looking for the north arrow, but it's the back of the property, which is, I don't see a north arrow.
The north arrow.
Top of the sheet.
North arrow's on the side, on the
So-
grading plan,
So, there's
to the right.
2 foot breaks in the contours matching existing contours, so that's really my biggest concern is grading. The last thing you want to do is have a driveway, as is shown for lot number 4, a driveway that's coming down off the road that's aimed directly at the house into a garage at the front of the house. It becomes a rain flume so that you can flood the house. In those conditions, you're better off having the driveway on the side as is shown for lot 1. So all those issues, and as I walked through, kind of with a 3-dimensional eye going on, and that was what Anthony and I were talking about, that's the most critical issue, I think, on this site, is the grading. That said, we had asked about driveway profiles, vertical curves, the road profile. Ultimately, we're gonna need construction details for the town road, showing that the road as proposed meets the town road specs. We're gonna deem it as a minor road, which is what it is by section A 63-7. But we've gotta show compliance with the town road specs. We have to deal with drainage. This is gonna be one of those challenging areas where you need to collect the drainage and get it to wherever you're gonna treat it for stormwater. The issue of stormwater during construction is gonna be addressed in John's SWIP. The SWIP will deal with construction phase drainage and ultimate water quality for stormwater on the site. So that's all to be received in the future as it may be. We need to make sure, the other thing, John, as they're doing this, make sure there's enough identification of existing and proposed contour numbers so you can really follow it. It looks as if the road as it comes in, if you come up the hill at station 3+0, between 3+0 and 4+0, actually at 3+30, is where the loop drive ties in. So the road is coming in at a T intersection with the road coming in off of Scunnamunk, but the main road is at 10%. Well, that doesn't meet the town road code. You can't have a road coming into a 10% slope. So there's supposed to be a plateau at that 3+30 so that the interconnecting road isn't coming into a 10% grade. So that's a problem, and that is gonna impact all the grading. So that you're gonna have to build in when you come up with your final grading plan. Most of my comments, and again, they're gonna become more detailed as we have kind of more finalized plans, but as they say in real estate, location, 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 I think this site plan is grading, grading, grading. Because everything is dependent on how you're gonna deal with the grades to make it work. And, it's a bit of a challenge. I don't know where it stands with the town's hydrogeologist for the wells. That's gonna be something that is gonna have to be addressed. Obviously, John has already told us he's dealing with Orange County Sewer District 1. He's already told us he's gonna get us the conditions of the O&R easement to make sure that there's no problems with the provisions. It will have to go to Orange County Health for realty. It will need to go to Orange County Planning and as well the Village of Monroe as part of the 239 referrals. I'm suspecting that because this is a town road, a drainage district may need to be created for the stormwater improvements, so that needs some coordination with the town board. And I believe tonight we got a confirmation that you've started the process with Parks Recreation Historic Preservation as part of the CRIS submittal. So that was on my list, and that's already started.
Did you submit to DEC yet?
No, I can't go there until we get the one there.
Okay. Oh, no, just like to get a comp for, we haven't, have we circulated a notice of intent at this point?
We did, yeah. We did it the last.
Or did we declare our intent, but do we actually, did you circulate a notice of intent?
I think we declared, I don't know.
All right.
Remember.
All right, so we have to, if we declared our intent, then we
I
need
can't
to.
get into my emails here on.
Okay, then we need to circulate. Do you envision that this plan, the layout itself, the lot lines, the locations of dwellings, with the changes in grading, you think they're gonna change significantly?
The layout, I don't think it's gonna change significantly, but looking at this, I think I actually, I'm gonna pull the road down a little bit from lots 2.
Yeah, I wouldn't circulate until you've got.
Something a little closer?
The grading is such a big issue that I think John needs to wrestle with that.
And I do wanna get the stormwater kind of.
Okay.
From the planning.
Right, we actually do have a GML review, but it may need to be sent again if it's,
Yeah.
you know,
My,
the plan
my two
changed.
last comments, just so I don't forget.
Sure.
A65, the town road specs, actually has a provision where you can't have a more than 500 foot with a cul-de-sac roadway. But having participated in the preparation of the code, I don't think it contemplated a loop of this type. It was more intended as a conventional cul-de-sac. I don't know if Mike believes that's something that the planning board can interpret, or if we need the highway superintendent to just nod. But I think that, clearly this one is, in my mind, is not a problem. I don't think this is the configuration that we intended to avoid with the 500-foot limitation.
So this is an A65?
A65 21F, number 1.
I remember what the definition of 1 point.
So it says Coles de Sac, maximum length shall be 500 feet, minimum radius for the right-of-way at the turnaround shall be 50 feet, and the outside curb radius shall be 40 feet.
Yes,
So I guess the question is, what's the definition of cul-de-sac?
Cul-de-sac is defined as a short, dead-end street terminating in a vehicular turnaround area.
I don't think
This is not that. So
no.
I think we should just go on the record saying this isn't one of those.
No.
And my last comment was, there's a lot of overlap between the Conservation Commission's concerns and some of the things I'm looking at. So I think if we get some solutions from John, I think it'll tailor into a solution to both letters.
Okay.
Although in July we talked about a lead agency notice of intent, I don't see it in my file. Are you suggesting I hold off until the grading is more definite, or you want me to do it?
Do you think one more iteration, you'll be closer?
I don't think that would harm the lead agency. That's just there.
Yeah, I think lead agency is okay, but the referrals,
Yeah.
I think, are a problem.
Okay, so we
Make sure.
can,
It may have been done, but if it isn't, I'll do it.
okay, so we could do a notice of intent based on the layout we have right now. We'll circulate, and then referrals will be done,
Referrals will be done when we get
okay,
I'll call it final plan that we're letting.
right. Because we're gonna, as a notice of intent, we're gonna send it to DEC, so they'll give us kind of their standard letter of what they're concerned with and natural heritage program and all that.
That's why I'd want to have the grading, the stormwater areas defined,
Okay, all right. All right, so this is still a work in progress. At some point, we have to determine whether this meets the requirements of the cluster subdivision. You provided a conventional plan, and we have to determine what the maximum yield was, so that really hasn't been done. But you submitted a plan, I think, with 12 lots originally? 11 lots, and you're at 6. So I think if, Mark can opine as to, when you look at that conventional, do you think it's reasonable that they could have gotten 11 lots, or would it have been 10 or 8, just so we can establish it as the maximum and that they're within a maximum? Not necessarily tonight, just I think we need that so we can sign off.
Well, the only issue that I would believe, looking at the, let's call it as-of-right plan, the conventional plan, is the road issue. And John could play with the grading a little bit on the 11-lot issue, or 11-lot version, rather, to address road compliance, because the criteria that I generally use, and as long as the board is okay with it, as long as each of the lots meets the bulk requirements, as long as the road can be built and meet town road specs. And I don't look at stormwater to the extent of a design of a stormwater basin. I consider that as justifying the lot count. I don't go to full design, which some people believe is necessary. I don't know if this board believes so. But as long as the bulk requirements are met and the road can be constructed and meet town road specs, that's the threshold I generally use.
Right, I think we'd want to make sure that net areas met requirements, because we have the environmental constraints subtraction. And then, from my perspective, I also want to see a layout where it doesn't require like a individual permit for wetlands or some environmental permit that is really discretionary and over the top, because, you know, in the end, it could have been an impact could have been avoided, a permit could have been avoided. Nationwide's, it doesn't matter from my perspective, but when you start to get into assumptions that the yield relies on an individual permit or special permits, then I start to wonder about, the actual yield. I question the yield.
And the bulk, as I referenced, should include all the subtractions, showing that each lot
Right.
meets it with the subtractions.
Right. So I think maybe, Mark, we can, again, hear from you. I don't know if John needs to do any additional work to prove out the number, so we can actually establish the maximum and just confirm that the 6 is within the maximum. I suspect it is, but
Yeah, and if Mark needs anything else, we can fill in any of the gaps on the 11.
Well, I think you just verify that the 11 version addresses what we just talked about. I don't think that the road, as it's configured, addresses that road specification requirement for the plateau at the transition. So just if you adjust that, you make sure that the bulk table addresses all subtractions. I think at that point, we may have a legitimate
conventional.
yield plan.
Right, a reasonable as of right. So then we'll have the yield. All right, so you're gonna work on the plan and the grading for the proposed layout.
Yes.
And
at the
we'll
same-
start our notice of intent.
Yep, and at the same time we do the grading, we're gonna do this, we'll just start the utilities, the stormwater.
Okay.
Drainage and the sewer. So I hope when I return, I'm gonna have full plan set. We're gonna do erosion setting, we're gonna do everything, we're gonna put it in now.
Okay.
This layout.
Any
One more question.
comments?
Yeah, I guess, again, in relation to the yield. So in our referral to the county, they commented on sewer capacity and that typical homes in this area are 3-bedroom to 4-bedroom. We're talking about 6-bedroom. So, but they also state that the yield plan would allow for no more than 11 lots. So 3 to 4 bedrooms, I'm thinking, well, that's between 33 bedrooms and 44 bedrooms, and we're talking about 36. Is that germane to the conversation about, is 6 practicable or is 6 reasonable?
Well, these are in the sewer district. The county has the obligation to meet the demands of a legally constructed house.
And
Again, it just from the way that they're commenting on that, if they're expecting normally 3 to 4 bedrooms, so if there were 11 homes on here, we'd be talking about as many as 44 bedrooms, right?
But I guess I think that the applicant could still come in with 11 homes that are 6 bedrooms, right?
We're planning to eat over there and go to the bathroom in the city.
That's gonna be a map note and a condition. No, I mean, I think ultimately the building has to fit, and Department of Health and Orange County Sewer District have to approve the amount of wastewater. So, but they could have done a 11 clustered lot. In this particular zoning district, you can actually do like multiple. They could have done townhouses or something else and still had lots of bedrooms. So I don't know that the cluster subdivision and, and
The idea is
what
to
is laid
show
out
what
has
is-
anything to do
What is the
with bedrooms.
maximum approvable number of
Right.
homes or units? And the fact that they would use a lot of sewage is beside the point.
Right.
That's what's allowed to happen.
I think it's an issue with septic. We absolutely need to know the number of bedrooms when you're on a septic, because then
Yeah, that's specific
that's
design.
a major issue, right?
Well, it's a lot-specific design at that point.
Right, so then you're talking 3 versus 6 is a doubling of, right, so that's a big issue. I think it's less of an issue here just simply because we're in Orange County Sewer District.
And the jurisdiction for approval of the connections goes with the county.
Yeah.
And just the other note, the yield plan shows 11 lots with 6 bedrooms each.
Right.
So the comment seems, they're saying this represents an increase over the yield plan. I think they are
Misread it.
confused.
Right.
That was kind of my
Yeah.
question too, was,
That is the yield plan.
right.
Correct. So but ultimately, yeah, it comes down to sewer issues with the county, and the property is in the district. We've been to the county sewer already. They've already looked at our path, they've approved the path, so.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, I don't know if you, or someone could explain the deed restricted conservation area?
Sure.
What is,
So the conservation area that's created in a cluster subdivision, it's mapped. We would require monuments to indicate where that area is, and we establish what's allowed within that area. The intent is that you're preserving some kind of ecological, scenic, historic feature on the site. And here they're preserving an open space area in the middle, as well as the higher elevations. And then they want to do basically a buffer surrounding the lots, which would be protective of the neighbors. So the deed restriction is that each of the deeds are going to, I guess, Mike may be able to explain it better, but there's a deed restriction which will
No disturb.
right, have no disturbance, and it's notice to the owners, they're not allowed to do certain activities. There's also a conservation easement on it, which would probably run to the town, so that the town could enforce if they saw someone doing things within those conservation easement areas that they're not supposed to. I think the town could enforce.
Yes, or a
Their
land
easement.
trust, however it's set up.
Right, or a land trust, but in this instance, it's so small, I suspect that it may be the town. I don't know that Orange County Land Trust wants to take over a small area like this, but you never know.
so does this accommodate for any tree removal? Because it looks like when the road is going to be built, there's a lot of trees already marked, 12-foot oak,
Right.
18-foot oak. Does the deed restricted conservation area take that into account? In other words, we're knocking these trees down, but we're going to save these trees? Like, is there a requirement to put back some of what's being removed?
So we just discussed that the grading plan that was supplied, if it was followed, would probably result in the removal of all those trees that are shown.
Right.
So that has to be revised so that the trees that are there are going to end up preserved. In addition, the planning board, as part of what the seeker process, the subdivision process, we can require some additional plantings for screening with the neighbors if the board thinks that's appropriate. And we establish what's allowed within these areas.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions, board members? So I think from our perspective, we need to get out the notice of intent, circulate for lead agency, and then you'll come in with the revised plan, and then hopefully you'll tweak the conventional plan so we can establish the maximum lot count. And you've already made contact with SHPO. We'll do referral to DEC once you have the grading plan refined, but we're moving forward. And you need the hydrogeologist.
Yeah, that's next, now that we have.
Okay.
I anticipate that John is not going to get this done for next week. But what I'll do is I'll clean up my notes a little bit, and I'll forward them both to Noreen for a file copy.
Okay.
And send them to John so he has an idea what notes I had to help him move along.
Okay. And so you'll be back in front of us probably for, not this coming Tuesday, but our next meeting, Thursday meeting, October.
If it was up to someone else. No, it'll probably be October.
Okay.
It's too much to be done.
John not gonna be ready next week?
No, it'll be October.
You need to talk to John. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Have a
Sure.
good night.
Let's get these minutes out of the way.
Yeah. Joel, do we have a decision?
What do we need?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm just trying to do two hands.
Headed back to the city?
Right on the.
All right. Safe travels. Happy New Year.
So we're gonna make it October.
Which is right
Okay, I just need to know because I have to get it in the paper by tomorrow.
This is me.
Party in like
Thank you.
5,700.
All right, I'll talk to you tomorrow then.
Party in like 5,779.
Yeah. No, I don't need it. Yes, as long as I don't need it, I don't have to have it in the
What
paper.
year is it? What year
What
would,
part?
Mike, do you need something from me in order
uh,
to send
what
this
year would
letter
it be?
of
What year is it?
intent? You need to
In,
send plans?
the Jewish calendar.
Part one of the EAF.
That's what you're saying?
I got a few jobs. I need to send part one of the EAF. Notice of intent.
79. Party in like in 79.
You're not done, you're not leaving yet.
What's the starting date?
Okay. Minutes.
Oh, when the world started? Oh, this could go on for a long time, so we'll have to have this discussion another time.
Is this on record?
I'm gonna look this up later.
Is this on
So
record?
bad when I stand up.
I'm gonna look this up. This is news.
So are we approved? They said we can build this.
Yeah, no. Not yet?
He said no.
And Noreen said no, so
I
no.
listen to Joel, I don't care. Joel said I can build. Everybody can come help tomorrow.
I'll bring my shovel, not. I don't get dirty.
Minutes on?
Yes. Okay.
Good night.
If you guys
Okay.
want to stay for the minutes reading, anybody? Huh?
You're heading out, right? Vacation?
Yes.
Where?
Oh, nice.
I wasn't at that one.
Mr. Brower, how are you?
How old
Excellent.
is she? She's gonna wanna do it
Yeah.
in Small World 9,000.
Yeah,
You're ready for all this.
I like.
a long time since I was down there with little kids.
I took 30 years on that small world thing. Why are there so many of them?
Okay, I'm gonna brag. We have a new baby in my family.
May 10th, June 14th.
Adorable.
She's 5 weeks old. My nephew and his wife just had a little girl. Hadley.
The eyes wide open.
Yeah, she's 5 weeks old in that picture.
Missing anything.
Mm-mm.
So you think I still have minutes?
Oh, one day she'll be on the planning board.
No, she won't.
Like that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Alien beans.
That's what my mother said. Mark, have a good trip.
Good night, Mark.
Oh, man, you get to leave.
How old are they?
Yeah.
Well,
All right.
you're right.
Oh my God, how
Night.
cute!
Fantastic.
Oh, mine at least lives in Warwick. Not that I've seen her since the day she was born, but our schedules.
Yeah, I'll have to look at yours.
Working.
I know, I get messages too. I'm like, good lord, I said I was at
Minutes
the
and,
planning board meeting.
No,
not yet. Still have to approve minutes.
Thanks, Mike.
No wonder why I have extra packets. Yep. Jason, pass that down.
It's coming down.
All the way down to Rich.
Rich?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Good night.
you.
All right, we got lots of
Night,
minutes.
Mike. Let's do this.
They're easy if you've all
Good
read,
night,
you've all
Ward.
had them.
Let's rock and
I
roll.
read them, Noreen. I read them.
All right. let's just make sure, who was here for the May 10th, 2018 meeting? Who wasn't here? Let's put it that way.
I have no absence on that one.
All right.
Everybody was here.
Can someone offer a motion to accept the May 10th, 2018 minutes?
I'll make that motion, that we approve the May 10th minutes.
Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
So it's Jason and Jeff. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so that is 7-0, right? 6. Sorry, Anthony's not here, 6-0. 6-0 with one being absent. All right, June 14, 2018 minutes. Who all was here or who wasn't here?
Apparently I was late.
Lisa was late, but it was, we just did some resolutions that evening. And a referral, it was a 35-minute meeting.
That was a short one, okay.
Everyone was there.
All right, so can someone offer a motion?
I'll make that motion again, that we approve the Thursday, June 14th minutes.
May I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Favor a 35-minute meeting.
Any, any opposed? And any abstentions? And we have one absent. All right. July 12th, 2018 minutes. May I have someone make a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from Thursday, July 12th, 2018.
All right, and may I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. And all in favor?
Aye.
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 And any opposed? Any abstentions?
Was I absent that one, I think?
July
Yeah,
12th?
You should
Yeah.
abstain.
Abstained, yeah.
Okay, so we have, and I approve, so it's a motion of 5 with 1 abstention and 1 absence. All right, and July 17th. I will make the motion to approve the July 17, 28 minutes of the Town of Monroe Planning Board. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
I was absent. Should I abstain?
Yeah, you can abstain.
Aye.
So we have, it's 5 with 1 abstention and 1 absence.
That's it?
That's it. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, you may. I'll make that
Second.
motion.
And second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Abstained.